Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the piece of paper sitting on your kitchen counter is worth $10 million. Now imagine that by the time the dust settles, that same piece of paper has cost you your friendships, your safety, nearly $1 million in taxes, and a brush with death so close you can still feel the cold metal in your hand. This is not a fairy tale. This is what happened to Tonda Dickerson, and it will make you question everything you think you know about luck. Granby, Alabama, is the kind of town where everybody knows your name and everybody knows your business 2 minutes after you do. In 1999, Tonda Dickerson was a single mother, doing what single mothers in small American towns have always done, which is everything at once and never quite enough of any of it. She worked the early shifts at the local Waffle House, the kind of place where the coffee is always on and the conversation is always the same, and the tips, on a good day, might cover the gas to get back home. She knew every regular by their order. She knew which booths were wobbly and which ones caught the draft from the door in winter. She had built a small, quiet life inside those walls, and she shared it with a handful of co-workers who had become something close to a second family. Edward Shedd was one of the regulars. He came in often enough that the staff knew him, liked him, teased him. On the morning of March 6th, 1999, he did something that a lot of people in diners across America do without thinking twice. He left a lottery ticket as part of his tip. The staff laughed about it the way you laugh about something that will never actually happen. There had been jokes before, easy, comfortable jokes, the kind that passed the time between tables about what they would do if one of them ever hit it big. There was a loose understanding, the kind sealed not with paperwork, but with the casual warmth of people who trusted each other, that if any of them won, they would share. Edward, swept up in the spirit of the thing, was even told he would get a new pickup truck out of the deal. Everyone went home that night without thinking much more about it. 2 days later, on March 8th, 1999, Tonda checked the numbers. What goes through a person's mind in that moment is almost impossible to describe from the outside. The brain, built for a life of careful, ordinary math, simply cannot process $10 million all at once. It arrives in pieces. First, disbelief, then a strange silence, then something that feels less like joy and more like the ground shifting beneath your feet. Tonda Dickerson, a woman who had spent years counting change and stretching paychecks, was now holding a ticket worth $10 million. And then, in that same silence, the question arrived. The question that would define the next decade of her life. What about the promise? She did not take long to answer it. Within days, Tonda had left her job at the Waffle House, claimed her winnings, and done what anyone who has ever felt trapped by smallness dreams of doing. She disappeared into a new life. She did not divide the money. She did not buy Edward a truck. She did not call her co-workers with good news. She simply left, and the people she left behind watched her go with something that started as shock and curdled quickly into fury. Here is where the question becomes genuinely uncomfortable. Was Tonda wrong? A sober legal mind would note that there was no contract, no written agreement, nothing enforceable. The jokes in the break room were exactly that, jokes. People say all kinds of things over coffee and syrup and the low hum of a diner in the morning, and yet the co-workers who showed up for every shift, who shared the rhythm of those days with her, who laughed with her about the very ticket that changed everything, did not see it as just a joke. To them, it was a promise, and a promise broken for $10 million is a very particular kind of wound. They sued her. Multiple co-workers filed claims, and the local Alabama court, in what must have felt to Tonda like the universe pulling the rug back out from under her, ruled in their favor. The court determined that the winnings should be split. 80% of $10 million, suddenly legally not hers. She had gone from nothing to everything and back toward nothing inside the space of a single court decision. But the story did not end there. The Alabama Supreme Court reversed the ruling. The higher court held that verbal agreements of this kind, informal understandings about lottery winnings, were not legally binding under state law. Tonda won. She won again. Edward Shedd's separate lawsuit demanding the promised pickup truck was thrown out as well. On paper, she had survived. The legal system had, in a strict technical sense, vindicated her. But legal vindication is a cold thing when it arrives wrapped in years of litigation, legal fees, public scrutiny, and the unrelenting weight of being the person everyone in your community has decided to hate. The woman who walked out of the Waffle House with a dream had walked into something far more complicated than any lottery advertisement had ever suggested. There is a specific cruelty to the way the next chapter arrived, not from a courtroom, not from a stranger, from someone who had once been the closest person in her world. Her ex-husband, Stacy Martin, had watched the news of her winnings travel across Grand Bay the way bad news and good news always travel in small towns. Instantly and with embellishment, what he decided to do with that information belongs in the darkest register of what money can provoke in people. He did not send a lawyer. He came for her himself. The details of what followed are the kind that do not soften with retelling. Tonda was taken. She was in fear for her life in a way that no amount of money can explain or justify or make sense of. And in that moment, with everything the previous years had thrown at her still heavy in her chest, she protected herself. She shot Stacy Martin. She got him to a hospital. He survived. She was not charged. The law, which had been such an uncertain instrument for so long, finally landed cleanly on her side in the way that mattered most. But what do you do with yourself after that? What do you do with the knowledge that the ticket someone handed you as a joke in a diner where you were just trying to get through your shift eventually led you to a moment where you had to fire a weapon to stay alive? There is no version of that lottery fantasy that includes this. There is no daydream about winning that contains the image of your own hands shaking afterward. And then the Internal Revenue Service sent a letter. Tonda had set up a family business structure to manage and distribute portions of her winnings to relatives. The IRS examined those transfers and determined that they constituted taxable gifts rather than legitimate business distributions. The bill they sent her was $770,000. She contested it. The court sided with the government in 2012, more than a decade after she had first scratched a winning ticket in a town where nothing like this was ever supposed to happen. By the time every lawsuit had been settled, every legal fee paid, every tax bill satisfied, every year of anxiety and isolation accounted for, Tonda Dickerson had approximately $1 million left from her $10 million prize. 1 in 10, the price of the decade she had just lived through. She faded from public view after that, which is perhaps the most understandable thing she ever did. The world had shown her, in relentlessly specific detail, exactly what it does with a woman from a small Alabama town who wins a fortune and refuses to share it. It lawyers up. It threatens her. It shows up at her door. It sends federal agencies with spreadsheets. It takes and takes until taking is all it knows how to do. So here, at the end of all of it, is the question that Tonda Dickerson's story leaves behind, like a scar. Not whether she was right or wrong to keep the money, though that debate will follow her name forever. The deeper question is this: if someone handed you a slip of paper that promised to change your life, and you discovered that the change it delivered was loneliness and legal battles, and a gun in your hand in the worst moment of your life, would you still call yourself lucky? Tonda Dickerson won $10 million. She really did. The numbers matched. The ticket was real, the money was deposited. And somewhere between that morning in March 1999 and the quiet she eventually retreated into, luck became the most complicated word in the English language.